Get low.
Getting low, getting low.
All right, are we ready?
I'm not ready.
This is your final chance.
Okay, I'm ready now.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Laughing at Joe Doing an Intro. Hello and welcome to another episode of Tech Deck Karaoke. Today we are joined by Cindy Goodwin-Sak, and I am excited to have Cindy on. Cindy, would you please do me the pleasure of introducing yourself to our audience and letting them know what you do?
Sure. I appreciate you having me. I am Cindy Goodwin-Sak. I'm the founder of Valiant Leadership. It's a framework and a community to help leaders with their development.
I absolutely love that. I think all of us that dabble in leadership or do it professionally full time can use some improvement. There's no such thing as perfection. So you've always got room to get better. So that is a fantastic place to be, which I think our esteemed and impartial judge would agree with. Miss Sabrina, welcome.
First of all, you heard it here first, folks. I cannot believe he called me esteemed on the record. It's all here for us to all see.
Everybody makes mistakes.
Everyone, well, mostly Joe, but that's what we're here for. No, I'm a big fan. I've seen Cindy's work on LinkedIn. If you're not connected with her, you need to be. Reach out to her. She's so incredibly insightful and knowledgeable and connected. I'm super excited for today. It's going to be a blast.
I am somewhat excited, but mostly sitting in trepidation for today because I believe Cindy's deck is going to give me trouble. But I have not seen it, so I'm just going on hearsay at this point. But Cindy, if you're ready, I'm going to attempt to present your content as if I know what I'm doing.
Let's go for it.
That's right.
All right, here we go.
As you pull that up, I'll have the audience know Cindy did warn us before the show started. She's not used to clowning people. So I asked Joe to make it extra easy on her. So let's see how it goes.
All right. So this presentation from Valiant Leadership and Cindy Goodwin-Sak, we are going to talk about how we should measure our leaders. Ooh, I am already excited about this topic. How do we improve without knowing where we stand? We need a baseline. And so measurement becomes a thing very near and dear to my heart. And let's see what Cindy and has to say about this. So first, we have to understand, what is the role of a people leader? What is it you do here? So if you're my age, you definitely get this reference. And if you don't get this reference, you should cut your damn hair and get off my lawn. We need to understand that a leader's job is to drive results for their team. They're a member of that team. They're responsible for what that team is intended to produce for whatever organization, business, or mission they're driving. So as we look at that, they should be maximizing performance of resources towards a goal. So your resources are your people and the talent they can bring to the table. Your goal is what your business or mission directives are driving. Your job is to combine one to create the best outcomes for the other. So if we look at this from the perspective of the Inuits in the Arctic, then we would understand that they probably had some leaders too. And those leaders would definitely have been cold. And so one of the measurements they may have used for that is, how cold are my leaders? But we can do something a little better if we start to look at this. And it's going to start with understanding the motivation of the human creature. We have to understand what motivates people to understand how to drive and maximize results using people as our human resources. So first, at the base of our pyramids, we have basic needs: food, water, warmth, and rest. If you're familiar with the name Maslow, you probably understand the pyramid we're looking at. As we move up from there, we go into safety, belonging, esteem, and then finally we get up to the top of our pyramid where we talk about self-actualization, where achieving one's full potential, including creative activities, comes into play. This is where you really feel as if you have purpose and you're being fulfilled. So if you're a leader, you should already be thinking that we have to look at each and every aspect of this when we're looking at motivation, and that the higher up the pyramid we go, the more value we're driving. But the important thing, and one that Maslow led to, was that we cannot ignore the bottom of the pyramid and get to the top. I'm not worried about self-actualization if I'm hungry. So Maslow never represented his motivators in a pyramid is something you probably didn't know until Cindy brought it to the slide. And if you're anything like me, that rings very, very true. So where we're really focusing in most cases is on these psychological needs, the esteem needs, my prestige, my feeling of accomplishment, my belongingness and love needs, intimate relationship and friends. And we see these intimate relationships and friends build within our teams. That's something we should curate. It creates that sense of belonging. Those relationships are required. From there, we should be making sure, wherever possible, that we're driving prestige where it's due to our team, recognizing their efforts, understanding what drives them and motivates them, and then finally, hopefully giving them projects to work on that allow them to come to a feeling of accomplishment. I know for me, one of my big motivational challenges in the tech world was no matter how good I worked, all it ever earned me was more work. I never felt like accomplishing something. Now that I live on a ranch, when I fix 100 yards of fence, I get to a finish line with a project. I can sit back and feel accomplishment, and it's a beautiful feeling. So when we look at personal development, we've got the intensity of your needs along our y-axis and the personal development across the x-axis. We've got several waves or sine waves that are coming into this form that you see forming this overall chart. You've got your physiological needs, your safety needs, love and belonging, esteem, and self-actualization. And what you want to do is move as far right down this chart as you can because you're intensifying the needs that you're fulfilling. So our highest performing teams, our high performing teams have a very similar profile. What we want to do is understand what the profile is of high performing teams so that we can figure out which components of that we can generalize to know what to apply to our team to grow high performance teams. So the first they have is psychological safety. And this is something that is gaining in a lot of popularity and being talked about quite a bit. It's an interesting concept. My team needs psychological safety to both feel comfortable doing what they're doing, but really to excel. And so when we're talking about psychological safety, we're talking about trust. Trust that I can go and do a thing and make a mistake as long as I'm able to acknowledge that mistake and grow from it. Trust that I can bring an issue or concern to my leadership. Trust that I can be myself within my team. We've got the empowerment component. How much empowerment are you giving me? And the easiest way to describe empowerment is with its opposite or the ancillary concept of micromanagement. Micromanagement is the opposite of empowerment. You're telling me not just what to do, but how to do it at every detailed level. Why not empower me by telling me what you need done, what the outcome is, and then allowing me to figure out the right steps to get there? We need trust in the leader in the team, which is both ancillary to psychological safety, but its own category due to the importance. I need to trust that my team will do their components of the job, and I need to trust that my leader will have my back and be there to support me when I need it. And then I finally need to feel value and belonging, because if I'm a member of the team and I don't feel valued amongst the team, or I don't feel like I belong in the team, you're never going to get the results you want out of me. So companies with engaged employees outperform those with disengaged employees by 202%. That number should shock you. That number should interest you. That number should scare most of you, because that's a huge uplift by just creating a team that feels engaged. And many of the teams out there working today do not feel engaged. 70% of employees are disengaged at work, which is the perfect accidental segue. I had no idea that was coming. Do you have questions? If so, keep them to yourself, because I'm not listening. 70% of managers are this guy. They want to know where your TPS report is. They don't care why it was missed, and they're going to send you 5 new copies of the memo to make sure that you understand the importance of TPS reports. Clearly, we're doing something wrong. We don't need that guy. That guy doesn't offer any value to the team or to the business. And I'm not trying to be sexist. That person can also be that gal. So what do we want from me? What do people want from me as a leader? What do I need to deliver them to get the value I'm supposed to drive, maximizing their effort? What do we know? High-performing teams feel what motivates individuals, that the boss has the greatest impact. We know how high-performing teams feel. We understand what motivates people, and we know that the leader has the greatest impact. You've heard the cliche again and again that people leave bad leaders, right? That's why they're leaving your company. So how should the bosses behave to make teams motivated and high performing. And I'm assuming we're about to get right into the deep of that. Leader behaviors. High performance leaders, again, have a very consistent pattern we can look for, similar behaviors. They have humility. They're willing to accurately understand and view and acknowledge their strengths and their weaknesses, right? They're teachable. They can learn. They can grow just like they expect from their teams. They're not above their team. They're not privileged. They're doing the same things at a different level in the hierarchy. And they're willing to learn from others, including in many cases from their teammates. Empathy. They're able to empathize with their team, which means taking on someone else's perspective and understanding how they would feel and how they would think in that shoes. And this is an interesting skill because it's becoming a lost art as the world becomes more connected. The more connected the world is, the harder it is to maintain empathy. So it's something that has to be actively worked on. 3, integrity. Their words and actions are aligned. What they say they do, they do. And this seems so basic, but it's, again, a lost art. Across the board, you can see leaders publicly saying the opposite of what they actually do. That juxtaposition is going to eliminate trust and psychological safety every single time. And then finally, they empower others. They build other members of their team. They grow the next level of leaders. One of the things I always like to tell leaders that I work with is the best test of your leadership ability is for you to walk away for a month and see what's on fire when you get back. If you can't walk away for a month, you didn't empower your team to do what needs to be done when you're not there to tell them to do it. So leader behaviors, humility, empathy, integrity, empower others, and recognize others leads to high-performing teams, which have psychological safety, trust in leadership, empowered and competent, and then finally, valued and belonging. So that leaves us with one more question. We know what you have to do as a leader. We know what that creates as a high-performing team. We already know the results of a high-performing team. So what question is left? How do we measure the leaders? Right back to what we started with on the title slide. We have lagging indicators, the things that will come on the back end. Those are things like profitability and revenue targets, product goals, and engagement. The interesting thing, and the reason why Cindy expresses these as lagging indicators, is because by the time you can measure these things, it's already too late to change direction. So these are the things we're working towards, but how do we check our progress along the way? We're going to need some leading indicators. The leading indicators, so we take leading indicators plus our lagging indicators to get to the end result. The leading indicators that I use to adjust course along the way to the lagging indicators are going to be humility, empathy, integrity, empowerment, and recognition. Things we've already mentioned in this slide being brought back to you with a little bit of repetition so that your brain actually remembers them when we walk away. So let's leave with a quote. Courage is not the lack of fear, it's acting in spite of it. And that's a brilliant quote from Mark Twain. Mark Twain was a brilliant novelist, but I can tell you as a combat veteran, it's 100% true. There was never a time in combat where I wasn't afraid. I had to act anyway. You're going to be afraid of making a change as a leader. You might stick out from the crowd. You might start doing something different. That's okay. Act anyway. And if you want to get more information or talk to Cindy, here's how you can contact her. I highly recommend you do.
Awesome job, Joe. That was fantastic.
Thank you. Oh, wah, wah, wah.
Well, no, I already warned the audience that you weren't great at clowning Joe. So what I heard, let me repeat what I heard you say, Cindy, is Joe, that was awful. I'm embarrassed for you. Try again later. That's basically what I heard. Am I close? Kind of?
No, because Cindy believes in empowerment. So Cindy would say something like, that was an excellent attempt at that. And I really like how far you got, but we've got a lot of work to do. And I'm here to work with you and help you through the struggle.
And I trust that you can do it. You can do it. That's right.
It was fantastic.
I know. That's why I clown him, by the way, is because we even have this whole series out now of just how many people go, I'm going to use that. That was so good. So, you got to kind of bring them down a little bit, everyone's.
I got to figure out how to work in that leaders are cold. That's not where I was going with that picture, but with the in the Arctic, but hey, I like it.
It works.
Yeah, I had no idea what to do with that slide. I'm like, this one is a total red herring for me.
I was pretty impressed with it though.
Well, excellent. So I think what our audience would like to see now is what you really mean by those slides. Are you prepared to give them what they're wanting?
Absolutely. I am happy to do that. You know, you did a really good job. But so a lot of what I'm going to say is very similar to what you say. My story is just a little bit different. So I do believe that we should change how we measure our leaders. And honestly, a lot of it comes back to why we need people leaders. And so I do love this movie. It's a great movie. And hopefully if you haven't seen it, you should go out and see Office Space. But what is the role of the people leader? This is the fundamental question I asked myself when I became a leader, because actually no one told me. And had I interviewed for the first time manager role that I got, I would not have hired myself, because I was going for it for all the wrong reasons. But if you think about it, when we put these really, really expensive people in these hierarchies, because they pay, the higher you go, you get paid a lot of money. The question is, what is their actual job? Well, their job is to maximize the performance of the resources that they are in control of towards a goal. And sometimes the majority of those resources are the dollars that go into people. And sometimes, let's say you're in a marketing team, the majority of those resources might be dollars that go into marketing type funds or advertisement and that kind of thing. But in general, your job is to maximize the performance of the resources. So if your resources are largely people, that's your job. And a lot of times I hear people say, well, my job is to prepare this person for the next role. No. The company doesn't care about the next role. Your job is to maximize the performance of the people that report to you. And part of that is actually helping them with their career journey and a lot of other things. But it's really getting them to perform at their best ability and grow. But if you look at the majority of our resources being people, for most leaders, the majority of the resources, the dollars essentially that are paid under their team are to people, then you have to kind of look a little bit about how people work. Well, people for a very long time have gathered in groups. And I think this is a great example. People collecting in groups, they work together, there's safety in numbers, there's cooperation in numbers. So people have a very vested interest in belonging to groups. And if you look at the individual needs, people tend to need food, water, safety, those kinds of things. And once those are satisfied, just like you said, Joe, they can move up the ladder, the hierarchy of needs. But if you notice pretty quickly, those belongingness comes right after safety. And safety, and a physical safety perspective, might look a little bit different in a work environment because our brains haven't quite caught up with our work. So a psychological safety might feel like a physical safety issue in a lot of cases. So our brains are starting to blend some of what is driving us from a biological perspective with what's happening at work. And definitely Maslow never represented this as a pyramid, but it is pretty cool to look at it. So leaders, since we're leading people and we have to maximize the effectiveness of the people that report to us, we need to focus on the part in the middle, because we're going to assume that people in general have food, water, and warmth. If they don't, we'll help them with that, but we pay them so that they can have that. But right away, we need to start thinking about safety, belonging, and esteem, because people spend an awful lot of time at work. And even if they do get belonging and esteem at home, they need it at work too, because they see it as another group that they're a part of. And the key here is that Maslow really said that you're biologically and psychologically, you're wired to move up this chain, right? You're wired to move up the pyramid or move to the right in personal development. You're always learning more. And when you learn more, you get to move to the right, but it also is basically saying that these needs overlap. What the big kind of, I would say the big criticism of Maslow is that he says you have to have one need to fulfill the next. And actually they kind of blend together and they overlap. But as you develop, you start to worry a little bit less about your physiological needs, and you start to worry more about things like esteem and self-actualization. So in general, we're trying to move up the pyramid or move to the right. So if you take those concepts and what people are seeking for motivation, and you look at highest performing teams, the first thing we find out is they have psychological safety. So safety was number 2 on the list. And this, to your point, Joe, is exactly right. This is being able to make a mistake and knowing what's going to happen when I make that mistake. So high psychological safety means that I know that I'm not going to be verbally attacked or reprimanded in some way if I make a mistake. I'll be in a supportive environment where both my manager and my team have my back and will help me rectify the mistake. And of course, I'm accountable to make sure that I don't make that mistake again. But I know that I'm not going to be essentially psychologically attacked. The second one is I need to feel competent. I need to be empowered. Definitely. This is actually where most leaders fail. A lot of leaders are micromanagers just because they've never learned a different set of skills. So they try to control the work for the people that report to them. But I need to feel competent at what I do so that I can rise up that pyramid. I also need to trust my leader. So trust is, it's a little bit different than psychological safety. It's basically, I need the ability to be vulnerable in front of my manager and know that my manager will have my back. They won't use that information against me. So I need to be able to be human. It's slightly different than making a mistake, but I need to be able to show my manager my vulnerabilities. For example, if I have ADHD or autism, I need to be able to be vulnerable and share that with my manager so that they can help me have a work environment that actually works for me. And know that they're not going to turn and use that against me. And then finally, you see how the ladder works. I need to feel like I am valued for the work I do, that my work contributes to the team because we're a social group. I'm contributing to the social group, and I also belong there because that's super important. And if you think about in the 14th century, 15th century, they used to exile people from society as a punishment worse than death. We really are biologically wired to need to belong. So these are really important concepts. And yes, companies with engaged employees outperform those by 202%. And this number just absolutely floors me that we don't spend more time investigating engagement. I think a lot of companies are looking for a shortcut, the shortcut with pizza parties and a pool, a pool table at the office, but it has really very little to do with that. When we look at what's happening with 70% of our employees being disengaged at work, it means they don't want to be there. They're not excited about doing their job. We're flushing money down the drain. As a matter of fact, for every $10,000 that you pay your employees, $3,400 of it just disappears because of disengagement. So what is the primary contributor to engagement? Well, it is this guy. It's the manager. And you'd be surprised when I talk to groups of leaders, I ask them, what is the primary thing, the number one thing that will move the needle for engagement? And none of them say themselves. And it's absolutely the manager. They have influence over 70% of the variance in engagement between two different employees. It's the manager. So clearly, our system isn't working right. The question is, what should we expect from our managers? And for me, let's start with just what we know. We know that how high-performing teams feel. We talked about psychological safety, empowerment, trust, and feeling valued and belonging. We know how they're motivated. Maslow has told us. We know that the boss has the greatest impact on their engagement. So how should a boss behave to make teams motivated and high-performing? And the answer is actually very well researched. The first thing we need is humility. Probably the number one indicator of engagement on a team is when a boss is humble. They're willing to accurately view their own strengths. It means that they don't put themselves down, but they accurately understand what they're good at and what they're not good at. And they empower others with strengths around them to use those strengths to make the team better. They're absolutely teachable, which is really important so they can learn about the people on the team. And they're also willing to learn not only from others, but from the team themselves. And they demonstrate empathy, which interestingly enough is a skill that you can learn. They actively try to seek what it feels like to be in someone else's shoes. And they do this on a continuous basis. And sometimes they get it wrong. And generally it results in like a bad feeling in the gut. But when they get it right, it helps the employees really shine in their roles. It kind of brings the concept of, you understand me, and I really appreciate that. They have integrity. 90% of whether or not a person trusts you is when they have integrity or not, or your perception of their integrity. Do their words and actions align? Do they keep their promises? And so integrity is absolutely critical for a leader. If they say it, they have to do it. If they make a promise, they have to keep it. And then finally, empowering others. They empower their teams by delegating their work. And Joe, 100%, any manager, if you want to get promoted, you need to delegate your entire role. You should delegate everything to your team, and then you'll easily be able to begin to take on other projects and look at new opportunities. But you got to make sure that your team has autonomy. And I did leave off a fourth one, which you see on the next, or excuse me, a fifth one, which is recognizes others. Empowering others and recognizing others are kind of tied for that fourth spot. And recognition is really part of valuing. So if we know that these leader behaviors lead to high-performing teams that feel in these ways, then what do we need to do differently? Why is this not working? Well, a lot of it has to do with how we measure our leaders today. We just recently have started seeing companies measure engagement, which is awesome. So we know that your employees aren't engaged. But what are you going to do about it? We measure profitability, we measure revenue targets, we've got all the different metrics, but absolutely lagging indicators show you what has already happened. Excuse me. And what we want to do is measure what affects those things so that we can change them. So we're not just reporting history, but we're making changes in the environment. So we should measure our leaders. And I don't like to use the word should very often. So me using the word should here is kind of a big deal. We should be measuring both leading and lagging indicators. And those leading indicators are humility, empathy, integrity, empowerment, and recognition, because we can measure how our teams perceive our behaviors. Now, sometimes folks say, well, Cindy, what if one of my employees just really hates me and tanks the numbers? Well, you never just fire an individual because one number is off, right? You always dig into it a little bit deeper to understand. But if you're consistently getting negative scores and people's perception of your humility, it's definitely something that we should take a look at. And I'm going to just share this final quote with you that really resonates with me. I believe that the reason that we're not holding our leaders accountable to this is because these behaviors are really scary. It's very hard to lead from the front, in being humble. It's very hard to lead from the front and show empathy and not be strong all the time, because we don't know where the line is going to tip if our team sees us as vulnerable and not competent, because that's really the big thing. We misunderstand the difference between being humble and being confident, and that they can exist. And so often we think they can't coexist. So what we're looking for is more leaders to step forward, demonstrate humility, empathy, integrity, and have the courage to do it in front of their teams. Because it's going to be scary, but they've got to do it. In the end, all of the performance indicators for your team will increase. And that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
You were the great close. That was great.
I love that. No, I love the whole thing. The close was strong as well. Like I could pick your brain all day on this, Cindy. There was so many brilliant nuggets in your presentation. One that stuck with me is that you can learn empathy. And I experienced that in like one of those light bulb moments in your life that you can like look back and you remember this recognition. 7, 8 years, maybe 9 years ago, I don't know, some amount of time like that, I climbed out of the bottom of the bottle and decided to put the bottle down. And when I did, I started doing a lot of self-work to figure out why I climbed in the bottle in the first place. And a lot of that, pretty detailed self-work. But at one point, I remember Amy Lewis, a close friend of mine, texted me to let me know she just got this dream job. And when she texted me, I replied, I'm so excited for you, which was my default reply. This is how humans respond. You did a thing. I'm excited for you. But I felt really weird. And so I had to sit there and like think about what that feeling was. I felt happy on her behalf. And it was the first time in my life where I could recognize empathy, like that I got the feeling she should get from her accomplishment on her behalf. It is something you can learn.
Absolutely, that's fantastic. And it is something you continue to learn too, right? Because you don't recognize you don't have empathy for someone until like it springs on you. So an example, I met a woman at a conference who is, she grew up in India, but her entire family migrated here. Her parents passed away, and there's an entire process, the grieving process, the mourning process, the funeral process is entirely different. And she had no one here that could understand her, that could help her follow her and her parents' religious beliefs in the process. And she's telling me all about this, and my gut just like dropped because I had no idea all of this was going on. And I just assumed that everybody went through the same grieving process, the same, the same end of life process. And so you just keep learning these things over and over again, and you get really comfortable with that pit in your gut. It's a learning moment.
Absolutely. And for anyone who's interested, there's a really great book on empathy, The War for Kindness. And it's a great book because it not only talks about empathy, where it comes from, why it's important, what its history is in our social upbringing, but it also talks about how hard it has to be worked on today when we're interconnected to people that we don't have a native connection to. And that's why you see so much bigotry and hate grow today, is because we don't have that native empathy capability to extend that far.
Interesting. I got to check out that book.
Yeah, that's right.
So Sabrina, what are your thoughts here? I know this is right up your alley.
I'm curious to hear your thoughts, and I think we maybe not intuitively know that you can build and grow in these areas, but do you have guidance for people watching on how they do that? At Continuum, we do this thing called an investment block, where you block off an hour of your time once a week to figure out whatever that investment area it is. And maybe your manager has some recommendations, or maybe you have some areas you want to grow in, but maybe there's better ways to do it or better resources. So what's your guidance there?
So understanding what you want, picking a skill to work on. So do you want to work on humility this week? Do you want to work on empathy this, choosing the skill that you want to work on. And then honestly, like ChatGPT, ask any of the bots, right? What does empathy look like? And they'll tell you, they'll give you words, right? So my whole thing is I give people words to use until they come up with their own. So, and I'll find a way to post this so people can get a link, but I have a little monitor card, practice empathy. So like, if you don't know the words, you sit them right in front of yourself and you schedule it on your calendar. I'm going to practice empathy, and you start saying the words until they work. It's kind of like you've got to start. You got to start somewhere. So you just practice, intentional practice. I will tell you that I tell just about everybody, you can get better at these things unless you are clearly a narcissist, and then then we're out of luck.
Well, then you're not even looking into those things because you already think you're great. So that's
right.
That's
right.
Yeah.
That's why we asked your team the questions about your behavior and not you, because you're not really a good measure of empathy. Yeah.
Yeah. So the note I'm taking there is if you do practice empathy really, really hard, and as Cindy said, intentionally, and you find it's not working for you, please seek a mental health professional, because there's probably some deeper issues that need to be sorted out there.
Absolutely.
What are the? Oh, go ahead, Joe.
Go ahead. No, please.
What do you think about teams growing together? Is this something that a leader can do to help kind of move everybody, or is this more of an individual practice or maybe a combination where you're focused on empathy or humility, whatever that skill might be that you're working on?
I think it's a combination. So every time I take on a new team, one of the first things we do is we come up with a behavioral agreement, exactly how we're going to behave to each other. And it may seem a little bit elementary school, but actually most people don't have a common understanding of how you should treat each other. So the first thing I do is say, usually I have everybody come in and bring what's a non-negotiable for them. And most of it comes from past trauma, usually from a bad boss. And so they integrity is non-negotiable for me, those kinds of things. And then you talk about what behavior looks like and doesn't look like. If you want to take it a step further, you actually come up with a conflict agreement. Here's how we're going to disagree and how we're going to remain professional while we do it. But having a discussion around how you will and won't behave, then you can actually hold each other accountable to it later. So when you get the jerk on the team, you can call them out for it because you all decided that you weren't going to behave that way. And then it's up to each of us to individually work on our own skills. But it's really convenient if you can call each other out.
Yeah. I love that. In a safe space. Yeah.
Yes.
Love that. The psychological safety point was interesting to me because I think it's important to note that safety, first of all, we're not talking about physical safety. The building's not on fire, right? Like that's obviously important, but that's not the concept here. The concept is that the person feels safe. And feelings are subjective and unique to each individual. So as a leader, this is actually harder work because you can't just generalize your team. You have to understand the psychological safety each person requires, because it will be different for others. I can be feeling completely safe, but if you launch a firework near me, I'm crawling into a basement somewhere. That is going to happen 100% of the time. That's unique to me, right? In my trauma. So I think it's important for leaders to remember that you got to be able to figure out how to work with your team as the individuals they are and bring them together as a unit. One of the other examples I remember that is just we had a person on our staff, really brilliant architect, and he had a military background. So we would have dialogue, and sometimes the dialogue would get heated, and we were both okay with that. We, in our own box with no one else around, we were okay with that. And occasionally with him, I'd say, no, this is an order, just go do it. And that worked for the two of us. Right. But if I tried that with one of my other teammates, not going to happen.
Absolutely. Yeah, you got to understand everybody is individuals, that's for sure. And that's where that trust comes in, and there is a difference, right? So at some point you probably had to trust your manager enough to say, hey, we can't have loud bangs coming out of the data center. This is not good for me, right? And so a little, trust and psychological safety, they do go hand in hand, but I've got to trust my manager directly to be able to share information.
100%. All right. I think this brings us to the big question of the day, which is not directly tied to leadership. Sabrina, who do you think did it better?
I am the leader of judging Tech Deck Karaoke. And you know what, Joe? I wanted to give this to you. I did. I want you to know I wanted this for you. I was rooting for you for like 4 minutes. But no, this one clearly goes to Cindy. I mean, this was so good, so informative. I have degrees of this stuff, and I learned a ton. So thank you. This was awesome. This was really good.
Thanks for the opportunity. It was super fun. I really appreciate it. Yeah. And you did a great job, Joe. You should have won.
You did. You did do a good job, Joe. You did.
I got to say, I don't feel psychologically safe because I think Sabrina broke that integrity rule when she said she wanted to give it to me.
I will say you did do a good job. I do love that you botched the cold slide.
That was a solid botch. I definitely had no idea where to go with that slide, and I do love seeing those because I'm like, can I spin up some BS quick enough? And the answer was no. No,
but cold leaders are cold. That works.
Leaders are cold. You need a coat. Leaders are cold. Oh. Right.
That doesn't feel like it's hitting Maslow's hierarchy. You don't want to be cold. You don't want to be cold.
No one likes to be cold. That's right.
Well, Cindy, thank you so much for this. I think our audience will love the insights you take and that it made. That's phenomenal. Where should people reach out if they want to find out more about you and what you can do for their organizations?
Probably the easiest way is LinkedIn. So find me on LinkedIn and follow the trail from there.
Awesome.
Well, excellent. Thank you very much for attending. And Sabrina, it happened.
It happened. We did the thing. All right, you guys. Until next time. See you later.
Thanks.